Good afternoon. Well, I guess it is evening. My name is Hazel Scott, and I am so very pleased to be here with you tonight. Thank you for inviting me. Now, I don't know if all of you had a chance to hear the music that I was playing as you came in and found your seats. That song is from an album, Round Midnight. I made that album later in life. I don't know. I was feeling reflective because you see, on June 11th, I will be 60 years old. That makes a lot of people want to reflect on their lives. But there is something else behind that. There was a PBS special that recently came out about me. It's called The Disappearance of Miss Scott. How does anyone disappear? Maybe I can rephrase that and say, how does anyone who made history as the first African American to have her own television show in 1950? Because if you recall, in 1950, there were very, very, very few Black people on television. In fact, it was so rare when Black people saw a Black person on television, they would get on the phone immediately and start calling. Hey, turn on channel 5. So-and-so is on. Turn on channel 5. That was how rare it was. And my TV show was called The Hazel Scott Show. It featured me as host and two tremendously talented men, Charles Mingus on bass and Max Roach on drums. We made music, beautiful music, and we got good reviews. Now, our television show started in New York. 15 minutes on a Friday night, every Friday night. It got so popular, it was expanded to 3 nights a week, and it expanded from a local television show to a national television show. And we got tremendous ratings. It went through the roof. And they thought that I was a warm and versatile host. I was riding high. Now, I ask you, with that kind of exposure, how could I just disappear? What happened to Hazel Scott? I really had to think about that. Was I a one-hit wonder? You know, you hear of these people who have success early in life and then they just disappear and you never hear about them again. Was that my case? So I thought, I will make a list of all of my major accomplishments. And I'm going to share that list with you. And you can figure out what you think about it. This is my list of the most grand accomplishments in my life. First off, I have to start. I was a child prodigy on the piano. I started playing at 3 years old. And when I was 8, my mother knew talent when she saw it. So she marched me in to Julliard at 8 years old and demanded that they give me an audition. And they demanded that I play and be enrolled. Now, they don't enroll 8-year-olds in Julliard, right? Has to be 16. But they gave me an audition, and I played Rachmaninoff. Now, Rachmaninoff had big hands, and mine were tiny, 8 years old. But I played my own version. And one of the teachers was so impressed, called me a genius. I like that, because I was a bit of a ham. He took me under his wing and taught me classical music. And when I turned 13, not only could I play classical music, I could play jazz. And I was playing in my mother's, she had an all-women's band. They played saxophone and I played the piano. And I was always stealing the spotlight. I'm talented, that's who I was. And I loved to share my talent. Now, when I turned 15, I got my first job. And that was as a intermission pianist. Do you know what that is? Yes. So my first stint, I played.
Hazel, I have to interrupt you for a
Yes.
minute. I'm sorry. You've got to stand just a little bit, that we're having just a little bit over this way,
Okay.
so that the
That's it?
video people.
Okay, good. Hello, video people. So when I was 15, I was hired at a nightclub as an intermission pianist. Now, I was playing for a well-regarded cabaret singer, Frances Faye. Oh, she was big. So when Frances took her break, I came to the piano and I had over, I don't know, hundreds of standard jazz pieces in my repertoire. So I sat down to play, to get the spotlight on me. As soon as I started playing, the waiter came over and he said, "Oh, you can't play that. That's what Miss Faye plays." Oh, okay. So after 2 or 3 false starts, I kept trying again. He kept coming over. I said, I bet I can play something that Miss Faye has never played in her repertoire. And I want to share with you just what I played. Now imagine this in the nightclub. It's a concert, right? It's classical music. And the people in the audience would go, "What is she doing? This is a nightclub. This is not a classical concert. Who hired her?" People were getting very irritated. Is anybody going to pull her off the stage? But wait, listen, listen. Head started bobbing, shoulders waving. People were dancing in their seats, patting their feet. Oh, yes. What was I doing? I was jazzing the classics, and the people loved it. Yes. Bebopping, boogieing. Yes. That's how I got my start, jazzing the classics. My mother hated it. She was a pure classical music, but I had my own ideas, and I love jazz, and I love jazzing the classics. From then, my fame just spread all over New York City. The next thing I knew, yes, I was playing at Cafe Society. Cafe Society in New York was the club, and it was the only integrated club in New York City. And everybody who was anybody hung out at that club. I mean, all of the famous musicians, Count Basie, Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, Billie Holiday, everybody was there. And I got a chance to learn at their feet. And they were so giving with their talent and experience and mentoring me. And because that was such a famous club, Eleanor Roosevelt would come. Nelson Rockefeller would come. Langston Hughes, Paul Robeson, anybody who was anybody. They were in New York, they stopped by Cafe Society. And they knew who I was. My big sister, Billie Holiday, made sure everybody knew who I was. She got me that job. But my talent enabled me to stay there. And it wasn't long that I made my first record. You could guess what that was. Of course, it was jazzing the classics, because that's what people wanted to hear. So my list goes on. I'm doing that. My fame spreads. Then, after that album, I started touring all over the United States. I played mostly jazz, but some classical. I kept that under my belt, some classical music. I played at the 1939 New York's World Fair. I played at Carnegie Hall. I played for the Queen of England. I was on talk shows. I was on the Ed Sullivan Show. I was in Time magazine. I was in 5 movies. Now I ask you, how could I have disappeared? My reputation was national. How does that happen? Well, when I began touring, I had to think about that. How do I want to be depicted? How do I want to be treated on the world stage? I had to think about that. Well, I knew I didn't want to play for any segregated audiences. And as I grew more popular, Hollywood came a calling. They were offering me roles, maids, prostitutes. I'm not playing any of those. So in my contract, at a young 25, 26 years old, I put in my contract, I will not play for any segregated audiences. I will not play any mammies, maids, subservient types of roles. I will not do it. Why? I was on a mission. At a young age, I simply wanted Black entertainers to be depicted in a fair way, to be treated in a fair and dignified way. That's all I wanted. And if I came to a venue and the audience was segregated, I did not play. I left. So there were 3 events that I believe contributed to the fact that I disappeared. Let me share those with you. The first one was in Pasco, Washington. Yes, yes. I was on a bus on a tour. The bus got snowbound in Pasco. It was lucky that the bus was able to pull into the bus depot. And there was a restaurant in the depot. I got out with everyone else, walked into the restaurant, and asked to be seated for dinner. The hostess looked at me and she says, "I'm sorry, we don't serve Negroes." That was the term back then in the 40s. I didn't take that well. I was able to take my food out, but let me tell you, before I left Pasco, I found the police station. And I went in there and I complained. Do you know what I was told? The police officer said to me that if I did not leave that station, he would arrest me for disturbing the peace. All right, I went on, finished my tour, but the minute I got back to New York, my home state, my home city, I filed a complaint with the NAACP, and I won. And that victory was plastered all over the Black newspapers, the Chicago Defender and all of the other Black national newspapers. And of course, the people in Pasco and Oregon weren't really pleased with me, some of them, but I did what I had to do. That encouraged other Blacks who were experiencing that to fight for their rights, not to be afraid. So that was a victory. The second incident was on a movie set. That movie was The Heat's On. And the main star was, oh, I can't think of her name. Big name, though. I had a small part. I played myself. I was a part of the Women's Army Corps. We were entertaining the military. So that was a part of the movie scene. So they have me here. I'm playing the piano. When the caissons go rolling along, I'm jazzing that up too, having a great time. And so as I'm playing the piano, then the Black soldiers, they come out. They're all dressed in their military uniforms and they have rifles at their side. And they march onto the stage to the music, looking just as handsome as they could be. And behind them were their wives and their girlfriends. You see, they were coming to say goodbye, farewell to their husbands and boyfriends. And so as they marched on, the soldiers were here, and then the women came. And I'm still playing the piano, and then I jump up from the piano. The band keeps playing. I get in line with the men and their wives and girlfriends, and we start boogieing. We start doing the Lindy Hop. Oh, it was a great scene. We were dancing and singing. It was a beautiful scene. And then finally I went, all right, attention, about face. And the soldiers marched off the stage, and the women were flowing behind them, waving goodbye. It was a beautiful scene. But I had a problem. It was enacted beautifully. But I was looking at how the women were dressed. They had aprons on, and they were dirty. It looked like they had just come out of the kitchen, made a mess, and came to say goodbye to their husbands and boyfriends. So I walked up to the costume designer and I said, why are they wearing aprons and why are they dirty? And he said, oh, well, the aprons are, we sprayed oil on the aprons just so they could look authentic. I said, but why would dirty aprons make anyone look authentic? And why would women who are coming to say goodbye to their boyfriends and husbands, why would they come in aprons that were dirty? What is authentic about that? And the designer said, well, then the director came over. And he said, Hazel, we let you dress the way you want to dress. That's fine. That's in your contract. But we control how everybody else dresses. So that shouldn't concern you. And I said, oh, but it does. It does concern me. It's not authentic. Any movie that we've seen, where people are in military uniforms and their relatives are seeing them off, their wives, their girlfriends, they're dressed beautifully because they want the men to remember them that way. Waving goodbye, and that beautiful hair and clothing, flowing dresses. I said, I'm not going to go film anything anymore in this scene until the change is made. 3 uncomfortable days. I had people who were very angry at me, but I didn't care. Finally, somebody got on the phone, and they called the owner of Columbia Movies. His name was Harry Cohn. They told him that Hazel Scott was holding up the show, costing a lot of money. Harry Cohn didn't really care why I wanted the clothing change. He could care less. The only thing he cared about was he was losing money, and it was Hazel's fault. But I wasn't budging. He'd already spent a lot of money, so he had to find a way to get it done. And so I was able to get beautifully flowing floral dresses for the women. I was able to get them to go to their hairdresser and get their hair and makeup done. And the scene was beautiful. And then I got out of there because I knew Harry Cohn was really mad. Went back to New York. And when I got back to New York, this is what I heard. Harry Cohn said, that Hazel Scott, she will never, ever make another movie as long as I'm alive. She's done. She's through. And he was right. I was. I never made another movie, even though I had movies in the hopper that I had just not gotten to. They were waiting for me. He killed every last one of them. Why? Because I chose to take a stand and demand change. That was the second incident. The third incident, you all recall in your history books, the Red Scare, the McCarthy era. Everybody, all of the great entertainers, musicians, artists, many of them were on that list, too many of them, white, black, on that list. Somebody called me one morning and they said, Hazel, your name's on that list. It's in that book, The Red Channels. Did you know that? And Hazel, they have you listed as belonging to 9 organizations that are communist. I got a hold of that book. I looked at it. 8 of those organizations I'd never even heard of. I didn't know who they were. I did know the 9th one, and that was Cafe Society. That was where I got my start. The problem was that the owner who hired me was a member of the Communist Party, but he was my employer. I'm his employee. I don't know what he does in his private life, nor does he know what I do in my private life. And so I said to my husband, well, I can clear this up. All of this isn't true. I'm not going to, I have a TV show. It's doing very well. It's a chance of a lifetime. I'm not going to let anybody stop that. I'm not. All my friends told me, Hazel, don't do it. Because I've made up my mind. I'm going to reach out to them. I have nothing to hide. I want to testify to clear my name. I'm stubborn. And I ignored all the warnings. And I went up. And I gave my testimony. I had a whole 50 pages of evidence to show that I wasn't a communist. When I started testifying, blank faces. They'd already made up their minds. They really didn't care what I had to say. They were just sitting there. So I gave that up. But before I closed my testimony, this is what I said to them. And I want to read it to you verbatim. I said, may I end with just one request. And that is that your committee protect those Americans who have tried to perfect this country and to make the guarantees in our Constitution live. The actors, the musicians, the artists, the composers, and all of the men and women of the arts, we're eager, we're anxious to help, to serve. Our country needs us now more than ever. And so we artists, musicians, composers, we should not be written off by the vicious slanders of little and petty men. But you know, just a few days later, just a very few days later, my television show was canceled. Not because of low ratings. My ratings stayed pretty much the same. It was because the sponsors were afraid. They were just afraid. So they let it go. A few days after that, the phone stopped ringing. I didn't have any nightclub gigs. I didn't have any concerts. No Carnegie Hall. No Ed Sullivan. Merv Griffin. Everything went dead, silent. I had to make a living. Because in the midst of all that, my marriage fell apart. In the midst of all that. So I gathered up my courage and I moved to Paris. There were a lot of African Americans living there as artists and doing very well. And so did I. And the beauty about Paris, I made movies because I spoke French as well as 6 other languages. Did very well there. I moved around in Europe, played for Queen Elizabeth. That was a big deal. And what I really liked about Paris, I didn't have to fight segregated audiences. Wasn't even a problem. So I thrived pretty well, but I missed home. So in 1967, I decided to return to America. I had some work, but you know, my fame and the statue that I had built, it was gone. I found that I was, as an artist, as an icon, as an activist, I had just been erased. Why did I disappear? I believe it's because I chose to have enough courage to stand for what I believe. That I had enough courage to demand change. And you know what? I'd do it all over again. Thank you.
Hazel, will you entertain questions from the audience?
Sure, I would love to. Any questions?
One I saw on the chat here. Can you, I know you're not alive now, but can you, in our hearts, you're alive. But can you relate to today's problems of people needing courage to confront some of the problems?
Yes, I can. And I can simply tell you that if you feel strongly enough for something, there's a price to be paid for everything. If you're willing to do that and prepared to do it, then you pay that price. I was able to really help all of the young artists that came after me. Somebody has to do it, and I don't regret it. Each of you have to ask yourselves, what do you believe in strongly enough that you will take that chance and you will take that stand?
There's another question in this chat about your son. Did he follow you in the music business?
No, he did not. He's in a tech industry, but I tell you, he has 2 little sons, and they love to hear grandma play. They didn't do that, but I loved my son. I loved my grand boys. I loved being a grandparent. Yes, and that's one of the reasons I came back to New York, to be with my grandkids.
Yes.
How did you make your living after losing the show?
That's,
You can just, how did you make a living?
yes, how did you make a living after I lost the show? That's when I had to move to Paris. And, artists, white, black, whatever, we all stick together. And all of those who went over to Paris, we would all get together and we would have gigs at different nightclubs. And it was beautiful. We helped each other. And it was a wonderful time in France. Yes.
And there's another question about your mother, because she was such a support to you. How did how did she finish off?
My mother was just, she so believed in me. My mother discovered me singing or playing about 3 years old. My mother and my grandmother, they would sing a lullaby song to me every night before going to bed. I love that song. And one day, my mother was in the other room and she heard the piano playing. She was a piano student because her wrists were too weak to be a concert pianist. But she heard the piano playing. She and my grandmother, because we all three of us lived together, and they came in and they saw me. I was just playing. And that's what my mother knew. And so my mother, as I say, she was a classical pianist. But because she could make a living doing that, she taught herself to play the saxophone. Yes, and she had an all women's band, and so that's how and my mother was talk about a networker. She knew how to network, and so she knew all the stars, all the greats, and they would come over to the house, and so that's how she rolled. And so my mom, she and my grandmother stuck with me, and my mother had a decent career until she passed.
I'll ask a question.
Yes.
Was it hard to leave Paris? Because Paris, even today, I was just there, and they revere many of the Black American artists that had to escape there because they couldn't be what they wanted to do.
Let me tell you. The fans in Paris treated me like a queen. I loved it. It was a beautiful, they loved the music. They had no problem showing that. And in fact, all of the artists there who had moved over, it was just a different place, a different world. It was a type of freedom that we had not experienced here. So we did quite well. And it was hard to leave Paris, but my grandkids were calling. Yes.
Would you be willing to tell us anything more about your husband, Adam Clayton Powell?
I
Or
would.
your marriage?
This question is about.
Oh, yes. Okay. The question is, would I talk a little bit about Adam Clayton Powell? How much do you want to know? I can tell you, all right. I was a young thing, about, I don't know, 30, maybe 35, still playing in clubs. And Cafe Society was, as I said, the club where everybody appeared, wanted to be seen. So Adam Clayton Powell, Reverend Powell, would come there often with his wife. And as things happened, he got a divorce and we got married. My husband was a minister of one of the largest churches in New York, still is. Roberta Flack just had her funeral there at that church, Abyssinia. He was the first Black city councilman in New York. And then he moved on to become a US representative. The thing that was most interesting, because I was from Trinidad, although I'd lived in New York since I was 4 years old. I watched him as a congressman, This is interesting. Something I could never wrap my head around. He's a US congressman. And yet, one day Sam Rayburn came to him and he says, "Oh, Adam, I'm so glad that you are not affecting our sensibilities by wanting to go into the barbershop." He couldn't, all of the things that were available to the US representatives weren't available to him or any other Black person. Could not go get his hair cut. He that was the thing that was the hardest for me. And it was hard for me because he was always fighting for civil rights. But here you are, U.S. Congressman, you're making the laws, but you cannot do this. You cannot enjoy the facilities like the others. He was very instrumental in the civil rights movement. He helped to organize the March on Washington. So very influential. So that's, and he had another son. When we got divorced, he married another woman. She was of Puerto Rican descent. And there's another Adam Clayton Powell IV that's out there. He's 60 years old, and my son is about 70 something. So
I'm curious about if you were in Paris, I'm not sure on the timing of it, but the civil rights movement was just getting going when you were already in Paris.
Mhm.
And how did that affect you in terms of you wanted to come back, and was that part of it? The civil rights movement was starting?
Hardly, but it took about a few years. That was 63 with the march, and I eventually came back in 67. But I must say, it did affect me. And what we did during that time, the day of the march, there was the writer, oh, help me think of his name. James Baldwin, yes. He was there and a bunch of others. And there was a picture of us standing there together, just, trying to observe and do what we could in Paris. But yeah, we had conflicting feelings. We kind of felt we should have been there. Were we just hiding here when our country needed us back in the States? It was very hard. And there was some guilt. Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Did you ever cross paths with Nina Simone?
I did not. Oh, yes, I'm sorry. The question was, did I ever run across Nina Simone? I did not. I was mainly with Mary Lou Williams. Anybody familiar with her? Yes. Betty Carter, Billie Holiday. Yeah. And Lena Horne, we were quite tight. Yeah, one of my best friends, as well as, of course, Frank Sinatra and Skinny Lenny. Who's Skinny Lenny? Leonard Bernstein. We called him Skinny Lenny. Yes.
Just out of curiosity, was that the same time Josephine Baker was there?
Yeah, she was earlier. Yeah, I was born in 1922. She was a bit earlier. Yes. Mhm.
So Josephine Baker was earlier.
Yes. I forgot to ask the question.
Now, can you reflect again, thinking about today? There was a way we were going in the 60s. We were going to more and more, presumably, equality there. Do you see any differences? Did it end up the way you would have hoped that it would?
Mixed feelings. It's like anything else. Progress, you take 2 steps forward, 1 step back. I think that's basically how I look at it. I could share with you, though, when I did make my way back to the US, it was 67. And of course, things had changed quite a bit. And I guess the one thing that the older generation has trouble with in terms of the younger generation, when I came back, the younger generation was the Black Power and they were heading up the movement. And that was great. But they didn't seem to think that the older generation had done anything.
That's right.
I had a problem with that.
Yeah.
But that's a part of educating younger people. But yeah, you are not the first. You're building on what we made. Yes.
I want to, oh, yes, go ahead.
I'm just curious if you knew Martin Luther King Jr.
Yes, I have a wonderful, yes, I did. He was one of the reasons that I did come back to the US. He said, Martin, yes, Dr. King, I did know him. And he came up to me and he said, Hazel, do you know that your concert was one of the first concerts where it was integrated, that I could enjoy it? You did that. And you need to come back to the US and teach our kids and share the sacrifices and things. You come on back to the US. We need you. And that meant a lot to me. Yes.
But did you ever think, when you were making the sacrifices, did you ever get annoyed that other people were going along with it and not standing up so much? They were perhaps playing maids instead of saying no, that kind of thing?
Yes, when I grew up, looking at the old movies, in the 50s and what that looked like, that's all you saw were, stereotypes of actors, Black actors. And yes, that was a debate between the younger Blacks and the older Blacks. And sometimes we would look down on them. Were you playing a maid? I mean, you can't, come on. But then I realized, if you didn't take the role that was offered to you, you may not work at all. You may not eat. So that was the choice that they had to make. And who was I to judge that? So I finally came around to that. Because if you wanted to be an actor, you had to take what was given to you, or you weren't going to act. It's just as simple as that. And you can't blame people for their choices.
This is wonderful. Was there any other questions? Or you're also, afterwards, would you stay here and talk individually, Hazel, to some of the people coming up?
I'd be glad to.
And is there anything else you'd like to add that you haven't told us before about your life, that maybe even when you were early on, or the very later part of your life? Is there anything else?
Can't think of anything. I think I just feel pleased that I did have the courage to make a difference. I think that I can share in some of the ways that Black entertainers are depicted and treated today. And I guess I would tell young people, if you want to make a change in anything, you have to have the courage to do it. And you have to be aware that whenever you make changes, if you take a stand, there will be consequences. So you have to be ready to deal with those.